What was the biggest bullet you dodged? My dad was a truck driver in the oil field in Canada. He worked a lot of long hours and every single day. So on weekends he would bring me and my younger brother on some of his jobs. We were on location and my little brother 3YRS and me 10YRS were waiting for him playing in cab of truck. My little brother opened the passenger door and my little arms closed it. Job's done. We start our trek home going about 35 km/h and the door flies open and I get sucked out of truck. I remember doing about 10 backflips as I tumbled out, hitting the ground on my back a few times and rolling my way to a stop. I stood up before the truck was even stopped in absolute shock. Next thing I see my dad looking for me and he burst into tears. First time I ever seen him cry. I'm 33 now and he still won't talk to me about it. Luckily the rig was in a farmer's field. So when we were leaving I landed on softer dirt. Not a single scratch on me. Dad thought he ran over me with trailer. Don't think we ever went to work with Dad again. I work for the company now. I fell out of a farm truck with I was about 8. Going about 35 down a just out of town stretch of highway. I bounced a few times and came to a stop just about to the shoulder of the road. I remember overwhelming certainty that I was going to die. And I rolled to the ditch. Missed getting run over by about 10 inches. Got up. My mom had come back for me and immediately took me to the ER where I was given a total clean bill of health. Not a bump though, I did have a nasty bruise where I hit the road initially. Who knew kids were made of rubber? A few years ago I had pneumonia. But my whole family insisted that it was just post-nasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the ER the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200 to 300 yards without collapsing. Have you looked into respiratory therapy to try to build yourself back up to running? I'm sorry you've had to deal with this. Around 30,000 pounds. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rear view mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane. And less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything. But 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. Years ago I lived in Vancouver and liked to go for long walks, beautiful city to do so. I was heading to a friend's first to drop something off and cut through a neighborhood with a lot of Southeast Asian immigrants. The ones I got to talk to were mostly from Vietnam. I was aware of a van behind me but it was midday and there were people out. So it was only a passing thought. A lady was working in her garden and as I approached her house she started to look behind me. Then she came out onto the sidewalk and started talking to me in her native language. I understood none of it but her body language was agitated. She kept gesturing to me to come with her up their walkway. As I looked behind me I see 3 men getting out of the van, which is now parked just behind me. By this point the woman has a good grip on my arm and has me dragged almost to her porch. She kept talking to me and pointing to stuff in her garden and I just listened, nodded, and kept a good eye on the men and van. I don't remember how long we were there but the men finally left. Both myself and the woman let out huge sighs of relief. She then patted me on the arm, said something, and then went back to her gardening. I booted it to my friend's house. On the news the next day was the story of a woman who was kidnapped and gang raped. The victim was grabbed on the next street over from the woman's house. Not long after my encounter with her. By 5 men in a van. The men were distinctive and the description of the men and van fit the ones I had seen. That woman saved me from something horrible and I am forever thankful. Life is such a bizarre combination of having to trust and not trust at complete random intervals. Yet you can feel it. I am glad she saw and knew. I had a man follow me home once from a gas station. I noticed after a bit, and once he was fine with following me around a single block, I called 911 and led him to a police station where I pulled in and they pulled out. His story changed 3 times. First, he had met me at a bar I hadn't been at. Next, he was on his way home. Then it was that I had given him a lustful glance, which was nothing more than me giving a look toward motion as instinct makes you do. Being a woman is inherently frightening at times. I have many experiences in my head and can rewind to see horrible outcomes. I will never forget the look on his face when I pulled in and the police pulled out. Many years ago. My flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane taking off I think went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Just regular Chicago drivers. It's do or die on the Dan Ryan. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the back seat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hit a power line pole down the street, causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or 2 above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. Poor you as a kid. I often had a particular nightmare about the apocalypse and doomsday when I was little because the church talked about the end of days and the second coming of God. I had an aunt who would make us watch movies about such topics. I sometimes still have that dream, always the same dream since I was little. Not changing jobs in early 2020. Would have been a short-lived promotion after early restructuring and layoffs. I changed jobs March 9, 2020. 2 days later my city shut down and everyone was sent to work from home. My new company committed to 0 COVID layoffs. The company I left laid off about 80% of my department. Dodged a bullet, haha. Same thing. Mine committed to 0 COVID layoffs. Apparently restructuring layoffs were fair game though. Restructuring not at all COVID related, QI roll. After I had a stroke, I was in a coma and it didn't look like I'd wake up. The DRS asked my wife if they should let me go. I only exist because she said no. I didn't dodge a bullet so much as my wife blocked it for me. Edit. I didn't think this would be this popular. I'm posting a video my wife made of the first year of recovery if anyone's interested, warning. It's long. Honestly, this made me tear up a lil. Please tell your wife that she's incredible. My aunt did something similar. She saved her husband from a heart attack by using her nursing experience and network to get him on the table before it even started. To this day even doctors have no idea what caused his heart attack. But my aunt and your wife are legit superheroes. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. Halfway through this I was thinking you dodged being an unknown getaway driver for a bank robbery. Same here. Was slightly disappointed. Not me. But I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Wow. I'm sure this guy isn't completely responsible for you guys putting a safety system in place, but it sounds like he certainly had a hand in it. My newborn needed to be rushed to a super high-level NICU to be put into a state of induced hypothermia. Because he only had hours before he would suffer permanent brain damage. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The small town next door just barely upgraded their hospital to have that hypothermia suite. One of only a few in Texas. He's doing great. No sign of any damage. Our daughter is a NICU baby too. The only piece of unsolicited advice I will ever give expecting parents is when you're checking out hospitals. Make sure to check out the NICU and select a hospital with a good one. You probably won't need it. But if you do, you'll be happy it's there. Daughter is 4 now and a healthy little spitfire. Glad your son is too. I stayed up all night before a day trip to Hong Kong. You know that days when you haven't slept. You're just kinda robotic and doing the human stuff. Nearly zero awareness of anything? Well. I went to cross a street and my friend behind me snatched my shoulder and yanked me backwards just in time to feel the whoosh of a double-decker bus breezing past us. I just looked at him like, oh. Thanks man, and it took a whole extra minute for my brain to process I would be flippin' dead had he not grabbed me. I think I saved a baby's life once. It was in a city center. Crossing a main road with a wild bunch of other people. The dad was pulling the pram behind him onto the pavement while he texted on his phone. And the dumb beep didn't realize he'd left the pram just there on the road while he himself was on the pavement. Everyone kinda ignored it while the traffic lights kept that section of road clear, but then the lights changed and the beeping moron still hadn't looked up from his phone while a huge double-decker was bearing down on his offspring. Out of the whole crowd I was the only one to push forward and pull the pram onto the pavement. The complete imbecile gave a grunt of surprise and dropped his phone as the bus whooshed past and he realized he'd utterly failed in his parenting responsibilities. Which was some consolation. I hope it shattered. Thanks y'all for the praise. I don't feel good about the situation though. Just seething fury. And to those who told me I should have let the baby die. Go eat a takeaway bag of Speep on your way to a therapist. About why the bus driver didn't stop I honestly have no idea. There were a few seconds between me pulling the pram back and my memory of the bus going by. Maybe he realized it would be fine. Or maybe he was driving automatically and hadn't noticed. Whatever. I'm just glad I didn't have to see a baby die painfully that day. Forget the phone shattering. I'd hope he reflects on that moment often. I lost my favorite phone that day. That's why my next kid will be named Gorilla Glass. I survived a rocket attack that landed about 10 meters from me. Very close to where we were standing. We were so close to the launch site that the warning alarm came after the rocket had already impacted. Thankfully, we were able to dive under a vehicle for some shelter and the 3 of us made it through unscathed. Was going to move to a different apartment complex last injured at work and lost hours. Therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week some asshat was cooking meth and caught the building on fire. Edit. My username. My current apartment complex is notorious in my city for having elevator troubles. So in reality, username does check out. Also, you could say I dodged 2 bullets. 1. The fire. 2. I know bad stuff happens everywhere blah blah blah, but the new place really didn't strike me as the kind of place where meth heads live. So I guess avoiding those kind of people for neighbors was dodging a bullet in itself. I can answer this in a literal way. When I was a child, I was playing video games with my little brother. Well, he found our dad's gun and fired it. No one was hurt, but it scared the speep out of me. My younger brother used to dry fire guns at me. Till one time he fired a live one right by my head. Dad came home and wondered why he had a huge black eye. Your younger brother should have gotten a black eye the first time he dry fired at you. That speep isn't funny. Had a teacher in high school who was wicked sarcastic and witty, while also being a hard-ass grader. To me, the perfect teacher. Class was challenging, but we were all laughing and having a good time. He was a great mentor and I continued to visit his class even after I graduated. One time, post-graduation, I was sitting in his office and I had just given him some art to decorate his classroom with, and he was so excited he blurted, "I could kiss you." Something about the intense eye contact unsettled me. But I laughed it off. 17 years old girl. What can I say? Couple months later, he was arrested for having a sexual relationship with an underage student. I interviewed for a job that I wanted desperately in August 2019. After the initial phone interview, I went in for an in-person interview at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. I had a rejection in my inbox by 8 p.m. and was completely gutted. Then 2020 happened. And they laid off 60% of their staff and will probably go under. I'm thankful for that rejection every day. There was a pile of stuff that people would leave at our house when I was at university. Coats and stuff. Moving out day and we found a random samurai sword in the pile. We were messing about with it, trying to make it go swoosh. I was stood facing my brother while he was swooshing it when the blade dislodged from the handle, flew straight past me and stuck horizontally into my headboard. So yeah, my brother nearly impaled me while messing around with a random sword we found after a house party. Pics for proof. I can hear r/swords screaming about wall hangers staying on the wall lol. When my great-aunt passed away, I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement and suddenly my dad is like, "Whoa. Put that down gently and let's move away from here." So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during World War II. Bomb squad came and took it away. I'm just casually going to take a mortar from work. No problem at all. As you do. Did you ever hear back from the bomb squad about whether or not it was still active? My mother left me in one state and went back to my abusive stepfather. She tried to get me to drop out of my senior year at HS, move back to their state and just get my kid. They wanted a live-in babysitter, cook and maid. I was so lucky my grandparents let me move in with them and finish school. Edit. Thanks for all the love, guys. For those who have asked, I'm doing great. I've gone no contact with my mother and stepfather. They're still together and it's been one of the most healthy decisions I've made. My husband and my kids are amazing and she's missing out big time. My grandparents are alive and well and are still involved in our lives. It's always the grandparents that are the true homies. Grandparents have the grim misfortune of seeing their children become complete arseholes, and then treat their grandkids the way they wish they'd treated their kids. Raise your child. Spoil your grandkids. Spoil your child. Raise your grandkids, or however that saying goes. Probably isn't true that often. Does seem a bit of a blanket statement, but I acknowledge and respect the sentiment.